Thousands of Iranian missiles have reportedly emerged from underground launch systems, unleashing a powerful response against U.S. and allied strategic targets. The skies over the Middle East are now illuminated by streaks of fire, signaling a new kind of warfare where advanced military doctrines are being challenged by sophisticated asymmetric strategies. This is no longer a conventional conflict, it represents a geopolitical turning point that could reshape the global order. From deeply buried Iranian underground facilities to NATO's strategic bases across Europe, tensions are escalating at an unprecedented pace. At the core of Iran's strategy lies its so-called missile cities, vast underground networks carved into mountains. These fortified tunnels house ballistic missile systems and heavy transport vehicles, enabling rapid deployment, surprise attacks, and immediate concealment. This approach has significantly reduced the effectiveness of traditional air superiority once held by the United States and its allies. The battlefield is no longer confined to the skies, it now extends deep beneath the surface, where conventional rules no longer apply. Beyond military confrontation, the conflict is also playing out in the economic domain. Iran has leveraged its strategic position to exert pressure on the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical energy choke points. Any disruption here could send shockwaves through global oil markets. Meanwhile, the United States faces both military losses and economic opportunities, as it increases energy exports amid global supply disruptions. This paradox highlights how crisis and opportunity can coexist. Despite severe economic strain, Iran continues to sustain its defense production through advanced underground industrial systems operating around the clock. This ensures its ability to endure prolonged conflict. Another critical factor is the nuclear issue. Iran has accumulated a significant uranium stockpile, heightening tensions with Western nations. Its nuclear facilities, deeply embedded and heavily fortified, make any military intervention increasingly risky. Instability is not limited to the Middle East. Europe and the United States are also experiencing internal challenges, including security incidents, anti-war protests, and growing doubts about alliance reliability. Globally, powers such as Russia and China are capitalizing on the situation to expand their influence. A new world order appears to be emerging, with shifting balances of power. Two main scenarios are likely. The first is a controlled escalation, pushing all sides toward negotiation. The second, far more dangerous, is a strategic miscalculation that could trigger a full-scale war with devastating global consequences. Regardless of the outcome, the world is clearly at a historic crossroads. What happens next will not only shape the future of the Middle East but also define the global order for decades to come. This is no longer just a military confrontation, it is a shockwave hitting the very core of Washington's trillion-dollar defense industry. According to leaked internal reports, the United States has suffered billions of dollars in damages after multiple strategic bases were struck by low-cost drones and cruise missiles. What makes this situation even more alarming is not just the scale of destruction, but how it happened. Advanced Western radar systems reportedly failed to detect incoming threats in time. Even older aircraft platforms were able to carry out missions that were once considered highly unlikely. Some of these details, according to analysts, may have been downplayed to avoid a crisis of confidence among the American public. The conflict has now expanded beyond traditional battlefields into economic warfare, particularly across key maritime routes. The United States has intensified its blockade efforts, targeting vessels linked to Iran and extending its reach from the Middle East into the Indian Ocean and parts of Asia. However, Iran still holds a critical strategic advantage: the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow passage is one of the most vital energy corridors in the world. Even minor disruptions can trigger massive spikes in global oil prices and destabilize international markets. Revenue from this route remains a crucial lifeline for Iran's economy under sanctions. European leaders and energy corporations have warned that a significant disruption could remove a substantial portion of global oil supply, potentially triggering a crisis comparable to or worse than previous energy shocks. Amid rising tensions, Iran has also demonstrated diplomatic flexibility. Through intermediaries, Tehran has signaled a willingness to de-escalate tensions in exchange for easing blockades. This strategic move shifts pressure onto Washington, forcing a choice between escalation and negotiation. At the same time, new alliances are taking shape. Growing cooperation between Iran and Russia is raising concerns in Western capitals. Meanwhile, tensions in Lebanon continue to escalate as cycles of airstrikes and retaliatory attacks persist. Inside Israel, political pressure is mounting. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces increasing opposition and public dissatisfaction. Confidence in national security systems is being tested as threats continue to evolve. Another major issue is the imbalance in the cost of warfare. Advanced defense systems require millions of dollars per interception, while opposing forces can deploy significantly cheaper weapons to achieve similar impact. This economic imbalance poses a long-term strategic challenge. Beyond the Middle East, instability is spreading. Europe and the United States are dealing with internal security concerns and growing anti-war sentiment. A shocking security incident in Washington has further intensified concerns, exposing vulnerabilities within one of the world's most secure environments. The event has amplified perceptions of instability at the heart of American power. Meanwhile, in Eastern Europe and Africa, geopolitical competition continues to intensify. Russia is expanding its influence, while Western powers face increasing difficulty maintaining their position. All these developments point to a rapidly changing global landscape. Traditional alliances are being tested, and new power structures are emerging. Looking ahead, two main scenarios are possible. The first is a controlled escalation that eventually leads to negotiations. The second is a dangerous miscalculation that could trigger a large-scale conflict with global consequences. Regardless of the path taken, it is clear that the world is at a historic turning point. The decisions made in this moment will shape the future of international order for years to come. The latest revelations surrounding the attempted assassination in Washington have exposed a troubling reality: the U.S. security system is not as impenetrable as it once seemed. The suspect didn't act randomly, he left behind a detailed plan targeting top-level officials. In his statement, he even mocked the system, claiming that if he were a professional Iranian operative, the outcome would have been far more devastating. This raises a critical question. Can the United States still guarantee the safety of its own leadership? The response from Donald Trump sparked further debate. Instead of focusing solely on investigation, he proposed building a highly secure underground facility within the White House, costing up to $400 million. However, the project has already been halted due to legal disputes and preservation concerns. This reflects a deeper issue: America is struggling not only domestically but also on the global stage. Meanwhile, in Eastern Europe, Ukraine has effectively become a large-scale weapons testing ground. Advanced drones, electronic warfare systems, and new military technologies are being deployed in real combat conditions. Under Vladimir Putin, Russia has strengthened ties with China and Belarus, forming a counterweight alliance to the West. EU sanctions targeting Chinese firms have triggered strong backlash from Beijing, increasing the risk of global supply chain disruptions. In the Middle East, tensions are even more intense. Iran has mastered asymmetric warfare. Low-cost drones like the Shahid 136 are reshaping the battlefield. Costing only tens of thousands of dollars, they force opponents to use interceptor missiles worth millions. This economic imbalance puts Western defense systems at a serious disadvantage. Additionally, Iran's underground missile cities, buried deep beneath mountains, ensure survivability even under heavy bombardment. On the economic front, the Strait of Hormuz remains a critical choke point. Any disruption here can send global oil prices soaring, triggering widespread economic instability. Iran continues to leverage this advantage despite ongoing sanctions. In Israel, internal divisions are becoming increasingly visible. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces mounting pressure from both opposition forces and public protests. Confidence in defense systems is weakening as cheaper drones and missiles challenge traditional military superiority. Globally, a clear shift is underway, the transition from a unipolar to a multipolar world. The emerging alignment between Russia, Iran, and China is reshaping global power dynamics, challenging Western dominance. At the United Nations, tensions have reached a boiling point. Diplomatic exchanges have turned into strategic confrontations, with accusations and counter-accusations dominating the discourse. In conclusion, the world stands at a critical crossroads. A single miscalculation could trigger a global crisis. Alliances are shifting, strategies are evolving, and power balances are changing rapidly. The real question is no longer who will win, but whether humanity can avoid a catastrophic global conflict. What we are witnessing today is no longer a series of isolated events, but rather interconnected pieces of a much larger and highly sophisticated psychological and information war. This is not just a conventional military confrontation, it is a battle for perception, where every image, every message is carefully crafted to influence global opinion. Iran has demonstrated that its strength is not limited to military capabilities, but also extends to strategic psychological warfare. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has repeatedly released footage of underground missile facilities, fortified bases deep beneath mountains, and large-scale military drills simulating control over critical maritime routes. These are not simply displays of power, they are calculated signals designed to create uncertainty and pressure, keeping Western media and public opinion in a constant state of tension. At the same time, economic pressure is beginning to erode public trust across Western societies. Rising energy prices, the looming return of inflation, and the massive costs of sustained military involvement are creating visible cracks within domestic stability. Citizens are increasingly asking a difficult question: what exactly are they paying for? NATO, once seen as a symbol of unity, is now showing clear signs of internal division. Germany is prioritizing economic recovery and seeking de-escalation. The United Kingdom appears focused on projecting military relevance. Meanwhile, Eastern European nations remain deeply concerned about direct security threats. Each country is pursuing its own interests, making a unified long-term strategy increasingly difficult. Based on current developments, two primary scenarios are emerging. The first is a prolonged war of attrition. In this scenario, Iran continues applying pressure on critical energy routes, keeping oil prices elevated while gradually draining Western resources. This is not a war of quick victories, but one of endurance, where resilience becomes the deciding factor. Under such conditions, Western nations may eventually be forced into difficult political and economic concessions in exchange for stability. The second scenario is far more dangerous: an uncontrolled escalation. A minor incident at sea, a miscalculation, or an unexpected political shock could ignite a much larger conflict. And if that happens, the consequences would extend far beyond the region, impacting the global system as a whole. In both scenarios, Iran appears to be operating with long-term strategic preparation. Its use of asymmetric warfare, combining low-cost systems with high-impact outcomes, alongside external support networks, is creating a new balance of power. At the diplomatic level, high-level engagements are taking on increased significance. These meetings are no longer symbolic, they represent signals that a new geopolitical order may be taking shape. One that is no longer centered around a single dominant power. Meanwhile, the economic dimension of warfare is becoming increasingly evident. One of the most striking aspects is the imbalance in cost efficiency. Low-cost offensive systems can force opponents to deploy extremely expensive defensive measures. Over time, this creates a sustained financial burden, particularly for countries maintaining large-scale military operations abroad. Energy remains the critical factor underpinning everything. Key maritime routes act as lifelines for the global economy. Any disruption can trigger a cascade of consequences, from financial markets to everyday living costs. Efforts at diplomatic mediation are ongoing but face significant challenges. All sides maintain firm positions, making meaningful breakthroughs difficult. However, one important observation stands out: time appears to favor those with greater resilience and adaptability. On the military front, recent deployments and force expansions seem largely intended as deterrence and reassurance measures. But in modern warfare, where technology and tactics evolve rapidly, traditional displays of power no longer guarantee dominance. Domestic political pressures are also intensifying. Debates over authority, strategy, and the cost of prolonged conflict are weakening internal consensus in several countries. This makes decisive action more complex and uncertain. Across the region, additional flashpoints are contributing to the overall instability. Overlapping conflicts, regional rivalries, and non-state actors are forming a highly complex and unpredictable environment. The global consequences are already becoming visible. Supply chains are under strain, capital is shifting away from risk-heavy regions, and markets are experiencing increased volatility. Nations are being forced to adjust strategies to protect their own interests. Information warfare continues to play a central role. This is not only about physical power, but about controlling narratives. The side that shapes perception holds a significant advantage. Looking ahead, the world stands at a major turning point. The key question is no longer who has the strongest military, but who can adapt strategically, sustain economic pressure, and manage information more effectively. Regardless of which scenario unfolds, one thing is clear: the global order is changing. What once seemed stable is now fragile. And factors once underestimated are becoming decisive. In the coming days and weeks, critical developments will provide clearer direction. But one certainty remains: the period ahead will be marked by volatility and uncertainty. This is not just a regional issue, it is a test of the entire international system.